Pilipinas.
Good evening, I'm Pio Ontiveros. Welcome to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. Tonight on the program, the daily case tally inching towards 11,000 for the first time in nearly 3 months, as some cabinet members want the unvaccinated to stay at home and under stricter restrictions. Police are keeping a close watch over hotels serving as quarantine facilities to make sure health protocols will be followed to the letter. And for the second year in a row, the traditional procession to commemorate the feast of the Black Nazarene will be off the streets as a precautionary measure against the coronavirus. Well, before we go to our top story, this breaking news first. Hong Kong will ban flights from the Philippines and 7 other countries over the threat of the highly infectious Omicron variant. That's according to Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Other nations include Australia, Canada, France, India, Pakistan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The ban takes effect on Saturday, January 8. This is a developing story. We will bring you more information as soon as they become available. Now on to our top story. New COVID-19 cases soaring to nearly 11,000, the highest since early October. The Health Department reports 10,775 new infections, nearly double yesterday's figures. Active cases climbing to nearly 40,000, and the overall tally inching closer to 2.9 million. The positivity rate hitting a record 31.7%, which means almost 1 in 3 people tested turn out infected. 9 laboratories, however, failed to submit data. Health Secretary Francisco Duque says Metro Manila is now at critical risk as ground zero of the pandemic. Duque explains the region has a 2-week virus growth rate of nearly 1,500%. Neighboring Calabarzon, meanwhile, is at high risk, and Central Luzon at moderate risk. Duque says the spike may be caused by a combination of the Omicron and the Delta variants. The research group Octa earlier projected cases today may hit 10 to 11,000, and that number could double next week. But the group adds the Omicron surge may last only a month, as is the pattern in other countries.
Most likely madadagdagan pa yan, posibleng dumoble pa yan, abutin mga 20,000 plus. Pero ayun nga, kung susundan natin yung South Africa experience, at dahil marami na tayong bakunado, may chance na pagdating ng kalagitnaan ng January, doon na natin makikita yung peak at magsisimula ng bumaba.
The strict observance of minimum public health protocols is important now more than ever, with 2 highly infectious variants in the country. Always wear your masks, avoid gatherings, and get vaccinated or boosted when you can. Now, as COVID-19 infections surge dramatically, cabinet members leading the government's virus response want the unvaccinated nationwide to stay at home. Metro Manila mayors earlier approved a policy restricting the movement of the unvaccinated and partially inoculated to only essential services amid the higher alert level in the region. Now, Presidential Advisor for COVID-19 response, Vince Dizon, says he, along with the health chief, the vaccine czar, the National Task Force chairperson, and the Interior Secretary are pushing for the policy to be adopted throughout the country, even in areas without a spike yet. Dizon says it's only a matter of time before Omicron spreads in all regions. The interagency task force will discuss the recommendation tomorrow. Now, the government is looking to place another province under tighter restrictions in a bid to curb the surge in infections. The Health Department says Laguna may be placed under Alert Level 3 after cases there increased to more than 300 over the past week, from only 28 between December 16th to the 22nd.
They're looking at Laguna. So now they are evaluating the cases, the metrics, the 2-week growth rate, and also the ADAR, the average daily attack rate per 100,000 population. And so if after doing the assessment and they fall objectively under a high-risk classification, then that will warrant escalation to Alert Level 3.
The Trade Department is looking at putting a cap on purchases amid low supply of some paracetamol brands. The Health Department and drug companies urge the public to try generic brands while they ship in more supply. Paige Javier has the details.
Long lines and out-of-stock signs greet customers at some drugstores in Metro Manila. Many of them are buying medicines for flu-like symptoms, but most leave empty-handed, trying their luck elsewhere.
Mahaba kanina, pabalik-balik ako, pakatlong balik ko naman. Paracetamol.
Lahat na po ng tindahan dito ng mga bilihan ng gamot, naghahanap na po kang Biogesic. Wala po talaga ubusan
The Trade Department suggests that drugstores limit the number of medicines per purchase to avoid panic buying. Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez on Tuesday said there's tight supply for some brands of paracetamol due to delivery cutoff. But Lopez assures there's enough supply, especially for generics. The Health Department called on Filipinos to take alternative brands for now. They're also coordinating with drugstores to speed up the replenishment of supplies. The Pharmaceutical and Healthcare Association of the Philippines, or PHAP, says it did not expect a huge increase in demand of these medicines.
What we're observing today is an out-of-stock situation on certain areas with specific branches of drugstores and of specific brands. I think in general, Filipinos prefer or are used to certain brands of medicines that they've been buying.
PHAP member companies are working on airlifting supplies from other countries. The group also says it will not jack up prices. Generica drugstore CEO Josette Abarca says demand often increases during cold weather and when COVID cases go up.
We have adequate stock of these generic equivalents, gone through that process of registration and review of our regulatory body, then it should be as effective as the innovator or branded counterpart.
A registered pharmacist backs the call to take generic paracetamol as an alternative.
Siguro po itry nyo muna gamitin yung generic na gamot. Mahirap naman po sa panahon ngayon dahil nga nagkakaubusan ng mga kilalang brands ng paracetamol. Mahirap naman po na wala nang may inom na gamot yung mga pasyente natin. Mas maganda na yung may inom sila kesa sa wala.
Paige Javier, CNN Philippines.
At home, COVID-19 antigen test kits may soon be approved in the country as the demand for testing increases. The Health Secretary says his agency asked the Food and Drug Administration to allow approved antigen tests to be used at home. The Health Department earlier said antigen tests are better used to check symptomatic patients for infection.
The demand is really great for this, admittedly. But we really have to educate our people how to do it correctly. And also the FDA, I have prodded, but unfortunately, DJ Eric resigned for personal reasons, no. But I've prodded him to make sure that the CPR of the currently available antigen test kits will be revised to include the home conduct, home testing using antigen test kits. No? Because now it's still done mostly officially in a lab setup.
An infectious diseases expert welcomes the recommendation as this would help contact tracing and treatment of patients. In the meantime, Duque says mass testing is still not feasible because he says it is costly. Now, more frontline government employees are testing positive for COVID-19. At the Metro Manila Development Authority alone, new infections jumped to 70. General Manager Romando Artes said 60 out of 100 people tested on Tuesday turned out positive. Artes added that majority manifested symptoms.
Rest assured that lahat po yan ay currently in isolation and we are doing extensive contact tracing to isolate all employees na exposed.
The MMDA has doubled quarantine facilities. Chairman Benher Abelos said 95 facilities now have an occupancy rate of 35%. He's suggesting the option for home quarantine again, as he expects their facilities to be on full capacity soon. Now, the annual procession for the Feast of the Black Nazarene, also known as Traslacion, will not make its way down the streets of the city of Manila this year. And as Stanley Gaheta tells us, this is part of efforts to curb the rise in COVID-19 cases.
Wala muna tayong translasyon ngayong taon na ito. At wala rin tayong physical mass
For the second straight year, there will be no traditional translasyon to commemorate the Feast of the Black Nazarene on January 9th. The decision was made following a consultation last month between the officials of the Manila City Government and Quiapo Church in the wake of surging COVID-19 cases.
Nalulungkot ako na hindi natin magagawa yung dati nating ginagawa. Nararamdaman ko po ang damdamin ninyo.
There will also be no physical mass inside the basilica nor virtual showing at digital LED board. Only online masses will be available on the Facebook page of Quiapo Church to avoid crowding.
Mabigat po sa kalooban ko na hindi tayo magmisa ng pisikal. Ito'y para rin naman sa kaligtasan ninyo at ng inyong mga anak o pamilya.
We did our best and gusto namin yung safety po ninyo ang maging top priority natin.
Many of those who participate believe that the Black Nazarene will heed their prayers and keep them and their families safe from any danger.
Lahat ng request ko since na nag-start ako sa kanyang humiling, binigay niya naman. Lahat ng hiling, makaalis ako, mga pamilya.
Naliligtas kami sa mga sakuna dito kasi napapalibutan kami dati ng may mga sunog. Kumbaga parang umiiwas yung apoy sa amin.
That's why many are disappointed when they learned that there will be no translasyon again this year.
Minsan na sa isang taon, magdiwang ang kapestahan ng Itinasareno, hindi pa namin makakapiling kahit sa isang misa lang, kahit pagdungaw sa harapan ng mahal na basilika ng Itinasareno.
The last translasyon was held on January 9, 2020, 2 months before the nationwide lockdown.
Tuloy po ang online masses, tuloy ang celebration sa kada simbahan, kada probinsya.
Devotees are encouraged to invoke the Black Nazarene to put an end to this raging global health crisis. Stanley Gahete, CNN Philippines.
Next on Newsnight, policemen will be deployed to quarantine facilities in Metro Manila to prevent people from breaching COVID-19 protocols. Details when we return. Stay tuned.
Gringo Honasan po. Sa pagbangon ng mga Pilipino, saludo ako sa mga taong patuloy na humaharap sa hamon ng pagbabago.
Bilang isang ina, handa akong gawin ang lahat para sa kaligtasan ng aking mga anak.
Pandemya man, tuloy pa rin ang serbisyo para malinis ang kapaligiran.
Serbisyong publiko para sa kaligtasan ng lahat.
Sa panahon ng krisis, ikaw, ako, magtulungan tayo. Gringo Honasan po. Saludo ako sa Pilipino.
Diet, exercise, and MX3 capsule, I am ready to serve. Kasi para sa Panginoon, hindi lang ako 4th runner-up. First place ako sa puso niya.
Mahalagang paalala, ang MX3 capsule ay hindi gamot at hindi dapat gamitin panggamot sa anumang uri ng sakit.
Sumagat sa labisa, bawat minutong lumilipas. Hinahanap-hanap kita, hanap-hanapin ka. Sabik sa'yo.
Welcome back to Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. The Tourism Department suspends the accreditation of Berjaya Makati Hotel after it failed to stop a returning Filipino from skipping quarantine. The agency also revoked Berjaya's permit as a multiple-use hotel and slapped a fine said to be twice the rack rate of the hotel's most expensive room. The DOT says Berjaya admitted that its staff did not try to stop the quarantine violator, identified by officials as Gwyneth and Chua, from leaving the hotel. It also did not inform authorities about the quarantine breach. Berjaya has 15 days to appeal the decision. Hotel personnel as well as Chua and her parents also face charges from the PNP Criminal Investigation and Detection Group. Chua skipped quarantine on December 22nd and partied in popular commercial center Poblacion that same night, only to test positive for COVID-19. She infected 7 close contacts. 2 policemen per quarantine facility in Metro Manila. That is the latest order of President Rodrigo Duterte after reports of several returning Filipinos skipping quarantine in hotels. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año says the directive takes effect today. He adds police are conducting random inspections of quarantine facilities.
Hindi naman ito kasi permanent. While we are experiencing the surge at nasa level 3 tayo, I think later on, may instill na rin natin yung instinct sa ating mga hotels na talagang bantayan yung mga ROF na naka-quarantine sa kanila. But sa ngayon, we cannot really afford na may mga makakatakas at mag-i-skip ng kanilang quarantine.
Acting presidential spokesperson Carlo Nograles says the police have enough personnel to deploy in quarantine hotels. Nograles also issuing a clarification on Mr. Duterte's earlier statement that hotels cannot be made liable for the enforcement of quarantine rules.
We cannot transfer the power now of even stopping if they would want to, if they would insist to go out, only government can enforce it. And we have not even to the extent of delegating them the powers to stop them physically. So that would be a messy thing to do.
The President ordered DILG Secretary Ed Año to ensure that may police personnel tayo to strictly enforce doon sa mga quarantine facilities and isolation facilities natin because of the limits of the employees ng hotel to physically enforce. It does not remove or absolve them of their negligence, the omissions of their act, the non-reporting. The cases will be filed. The cases will be prosecuted, and then it will be up to the judge to decide.
The Justice Department also points out quarantine facilities can be held accountable under the law on mandatory reporting of notifiable diseases. Funding for the Batangas government is up 30% this year, with the landmark Mandanas ruling finally taking effect. How do local governments plan to approach the budget increase? Our Lois Calderon gives us the details in this special report.
Meeting his health council was Batangas Governor Dodo Mandana's first order of business for 2022. Their agenda: spending the 5.4 billion peso budget for this year, a huge chunk he allocated for free health care for Batangueños, and building more hospitals as the Omicron variant dampens hope for an early end to the pandemic. That budget is 30% higher than last year's allocation, thanks to the Mandanas ruling that commands the national government to give provinces down to the barangays a bigger slice of national taxes.
That is really the first concern that we have right now. Really health. Kasi masyadong malayo talaga ang national government. Pagbibigay ng gamot, pagbibigay even ayuda, which is really very bad, napakahirap.
The landmark Mandanas ruling took effect January 1st, or 3 years after the Supreme Court told the Duterte administration to give local government units what's due them. Since 1992, when a law granted fiscal autonomy to provinces outside economic center Metro Manila, local governments had been getting just 40% of the taxes collected only by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, or BIR. But the High Court ruled that 40% must come not just from the BIR, but from all national taxes, including customs duties, tariffs, taxes from exploiting national wealth like minerals, and a whole lot more. LGU's tax share consequently now has a new name, National Tax Allotment, instead of Internal Revenue Allotment, or IRA. How much is that this year? almost 1 trillion pesos of this year's 5 trillion peso national budget.
Nirelease po natin yan sa Bureau of the Treasury and that should be credited to all accounts of the local government units.
The budget boost is seen to bring progress beyond Metro Manila, but the World Bank had flagged that local governments might struggle spending the money. Decentralization meant they need the know-how to handle functions passed on to them by the central government.
All eyes could be on Batangas as to whether or not the Mandanas ruling will be carried out properly. The province's chief executive was one of two petitioners who challenged before the Supreme Court how much share local governments can get from national taxes and how a higher revenue allotment will lead to the delivery of more services to the people.
Mandana says he and his team are ready.
Alam namin kung sino ang nagugutom. Alam namin kung sino ang walang trabaho. That's why tourism is devolved. For example, alam namin kung anong kailangan dito. I feel that there is an extra load on my shoulder right now.
And since 2022 is an election year, concerns have been raised on the likelihood of using funds elsewhere. That's what citizens should be watching out for. Lois Calderon, CNN, Philippines.
Consumer prices slowed in December, the lowest in a year, as food and transport prices eased. Government data show inflation settled at 3.6%. For the whole of 2021, inflation averaged 4.5%, breaching the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' target of 2 to 4%. Expect weak water pressure in taps in the coming days. That's what Maynilad is advising its customers for now. The water concessionaire attributes the weak pressure to the low water level in Angat Dam in Bulacan. The current level of 202 meters is 10 meters less than the normal.
Sana po ay maintindihan po ng mga customers yon. Yun po ay our way din ng unti-unting paghahanda o sakali man po na dumating dun sa actual na pagbabawas ng alokasyon dito sa Metro Manila. Ang overall request namin sa aming mga customers ay maging responsable lang po dun sa paggamit ng tubig na lumalabas doon sa kanya-kanyang gripo para po magkaroon po tayo ng contribution doon sa pagpe-preserve ng water natin mula sa source natin sa Angat Dam at maitawid po natin yung summer months ng 2022.
Maynilad assures its customers there will be no supply interruption at least until January 15. The company adds it's working to avoid a repeat of the water crisis of 2019. Back then, Metro Manila and surrounding provinces suffered extended periods of service interruption when water at Angat Dam dipped to below the critical level. A look now at what some 2022 presidential aspirants are up to. Senator Ping Lacson wants the supposed connections to the so-called Poblacion girl to be held liable for a quarantine breach. The violator, identified as Gwyneth Ann Chua, had bragged about being able to get away with quarantine because of these connections. Vice President Leni Robredo brings back her office's free antigen testing, the so-called swab cab, in response to the surge in COVID-19 cases. Volunteers of the Marcos Duterte tandem are now distributing construction materials to repair damaged homes in areas affected by Typhoon Odette. And Senator Manny Pacquiao vows to require all government officials to sign a bank secrecy waiver in a bid to fight corruption. The Commission on Elections is unlikely to reopen the filing of certificates of candidacy for the 2022 polls. In an interview with COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez on Politics as Usual, he said the request of the Cusi-led faction of the PDP Laban would bring election preparations back to square one. Jimenez also notes it would be impossible to postpone the polls this May.
Medyo unlikely na mapagbigyan yan, kasi masyadong maraming konsekwensya yung pagpapa-reopen ng ating filing ng COC. Remember, just apart from the fact na ang haba-haba na ng binigay na period for filing COCs, kung uulitin mo yan ngayon, hindi naman isang partido lang ang magte-take advantage niyan eh. Ang daming epekto niyan, down the road. Sabi nga nung mismong petition, humihingi din sila ng postponement ng filing ng balota. And that would probably be a logical conclusion of that. So makikita mo kung gaano karami ang gagalaw na mga activities ng COMELEC dahil dyan.
Meanwhile, Senator Amy Marcos says her brother, presidential aspirant Bongbong Marcos, gets favorable results in pre-election or pre-campaign surveys because many Filipinos believe their father, former President Ferdinand Marcos, did good things for the country.
I truly believe that history judges you over the long haul. And the long haul has been almost 40 years. Biglang siguro na re-realize rin natin at napapakinabangan pa rin natin lahat ang mga iba't ibang project ng tatay ko.
Catch the replay of Politics as Usual this Sunday, January 9th at 7:30 in the evening, only here on CNN Philippines. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, Olympic pole vaulter E.J. Obiena wants to keep representing the country. The Sports Commission's recent demand makes this even more of a possibility. And the Harry Potter reunion special got a celebrity switch because of an editing error. Keep it here on CNN Philippines.
When times are busier than ever, balancing work and life becomes a bigger challenge. So it's no wonder more and more people are turning to exercises that just don't give them physical benefits, but create mental serenity. So get flowing with me today and get that balance back in your life as I guide you through this invigorating Vinyasa flow. This pose is to relieve any lower back pain you might have. It's reminding you to stay home and stay fit.
Welcome back to Newsnight. Olympic pole vaulter E.J. Obiena says he will keep wearing the nation's colors. This despite the Athletics Track and Field Association's recommendation to expel him from the Philippine team. Patafa also recommended the filing of an estafa complaint against Obiena over funds allotted for coaching fees. The star athlete tells CNN Philippines Patafa's move came as a surprise, but says he's thankful for the Philippine Olympic Committee's support during this time.
You know, I think the biggest support I got from POC is basically saying that they will fight for me and make sure that I'm in the competition representing my country, Philippines. It's a privilege to wear this vest. It's a privilege to represent the country.
Earlier today, the Philippine Sports Commission demanded Patafa reconsider its decision on Obiena's national athlete status and to give the Olympian a chance to appeal. It also ordered Obiena to finish his liquidation to continue getting support from the PSC. Producers of the Harry Potter reunion casting Reparo on the special less than a week after its release. That's because the much-anticipated reunion mistakenly used a photograph of actress Emma Roberts instead of Potter star Emma Watson during one of its segments. Fans on social media pointed out the error online. In a statement, producers admitted the editing mistake. A new version with a correct photograph of young Emma Watson is already up online. There is another error in the special that went viral, and this one was pointed out by one of the actors in the Potter series. Oliver Phelps, who plays one of the Weasley twins, posted this screenshot, which shows he was mistakenly labeled as his identical twin brother and vice versa. Oliver is supposed to be the one on the left with the shorter hair, while James is the one on the right with longer hair. Oliver did take the error in stride, saying, quote, "I guess after all those pranks over the years, somebody decided to get their revenge." The show will go on for this year's Golden Globe Awards, but not the way you'd expect. CNN's David Daniel has that story and more on the Hollywood Minute.
Michael,
The Golden Globes return to the Beverly Hilton Hotel on Sunday, but the event will not be televised, and there'll be no red carpet, no audience, and no nominees or other stars. Only Hollywood Press Association members and some of their grant recipients. Variety reports the Globes reached out to several Hollywood agencies to see if their clients would take part, but no celebrities agreed to do so. The HFPA was rocked by scandal last year, including allegations of corruption and the revelation the group had no black members.
The truth is that I drink a lot, and sometimes I mix it with pills. And I'm here because I woke up this morning convinced I'd witnessed a murder.
Here's your first look at Kristen Bell in a spoof of such thrillers as The Woman in the Window and The Girl on the Train, a Netflix series titled The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window. Bell is also an executive producer on the parody mystery series, which debuts January 28th. Or does it? In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.